Now, President Trump and the Republicans are still continuing to push for massive tax cuts for the rich while denying that they're giant tax cuts for the rich. It's a very interesting tactic. And that I do suppose works on some low information voters. But of course, even that is suspect, as I think anybody who looks at the numbers and sees how much the rich people will save will go, oh yeah, that's obviously a tax cut for the rich. But again, what it may work on some low information voters then, I'll say, but it doesn't work with people who actually have facts. Now, one of the people who has some facts happens to be Fox News host Chris Wallace, who on Sunday decided to challenge Mulvaney, who was the White House budget director, about the claim that these tax cuts for the rich, which they claim are not tax cuts for the rich, will somehow pay for themselves through magic. He didn't say magic. I said magic because that's exactly what it is. Now, in this interview, you're going to see Wallace using statistics and studies and facts, and then you're going to see Mulvaney completely ignoring all of them. Watch.
The Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center did this analysis. It shows the middle fifth of households in America, those earning between $48,000 $86,000 a year, they'll get an average tax cut of $660 next year. Meanwhile, the top 1%, people making more than $730,000 a year, will get an average tax cut of almost $130,000 next year. Now, I understand that this isn't done yet, that they're only basing it on the plan as it exists at this point. But according to their analysis, that middle fifth gets 1.5% of the total benefit of the tax cut, while the top 1% gets 8.5% of the benefit. That doesn't seem fair.
Sure, a couple of different things, and I can't see the graph that you just put up, but I think that I have seen it previous to this. And what I think that particular organization did was, number one, they didn't do any dynamic scoring. If you go look at the details of what they put out, they assumed no benefit to the overall economy, which is just absurd to think that there won't be any
But I'm not talking,
economic
sir, I'm not talking about the economy. I'm talking about the benefit to the individual
let
family.
me finish.
The tax cut they get.
Okay, so look. On the what he said about, oh, you guys didn't, that's a flawed study, it's absurd. He didn't use dynamic scoring. Basically what he's saying is you didn't use our magical math, and that's why you came up with those numbers. Look, there's a reason that we don't, and no economist, no real economist uses dynamic scoring. You know why? It's because it doesn't work. They said the same kind of bullshit about the Trump tax cuts. Now, what happened? Well, it turns out they first of all, they had said that, oh, no. Like, if we cut taxes on everybody, especially the rich, then you're going to have amazing economic growth. Well, what happened during the Bush era? We actually had less overall economic growth than we had in the 1990s, when there was actually a higher tax rate on the rich. See, the math in the real world does not add up. But of course, Mulvaney's going to continue by pointing out, oh, no, but see, the families will do better because the economy overall, thanks to our magic math, is going to do better. Watch.
You can't look at the tax cut on a family until you realize how much better off they're going to be in a growing economy. But beyond that, they had to make assumptions because we didn't put any in the framework yet about where those particular tax rates kick in. Okay,
so again, we're talking about magic math here, and now he's like, oh, you guys are making assumptions, right? No. You realize that the whole idea of dynamic scoring is just based on an assumption that has been disproven. What we have is actual evidence that this dynamic scoring does not work and that tax cuts do not create economic growth on their own. It does not exist in a vacuum. Now, with that said, I'm going to get to one of the best parts. I'm going to get to the most obvious lie. Even if you believe that dynamic scoring, this magic math actually works, well, there's no way you can actually agree with what's next. Watch.
I mean, you can talk about, well, it's going to kick in at this level or that level, but if the middle income person is getting a $600 tax cut and the top 1% is getting a $130,000 tax cut, I mean, I thought the whole point was that the wealthy weren't going to get a tax cut at all.
It was, and I'm laughing because I was on one of your, I've done a couple of these interviews this week, Chris, and I was on one of your sister networks, and they were accusing the tax plan of not giving any tax cuts to the wealthy. In fact, they were accusing it of raising the taxes on the wealthy. And then I was on another network, and they were accusing the tax plan of giving all of the benefit to the wealthy. So it sounds like the beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Or, the beholder of all the tax cuts. But that's what he's saying. He's like, no, see, we were all, I was on this different network, and they were saying all these different things. So, of course, none of that's true, but my magic math is totally true. And not only that, but no, it's not a tax cut, even though they're going to pay a lot less. No. Well, look, if the rich people are going to pay less, then yes, it's a tax cut. You can't say that it's not a tax cut. In fact, you've got two studies out there. Yeah, you might call them absurd, but they're actually based on facts, and they actually confirm this, right? Now, of course, what they do claim is, no, we're not actually cutting taxes. What we're doing is we're cutting the rates and closing the loopholes. Oh, so wait, but has that actually ever happened? No, of course not. They always say they're going to close the loopholes before they pass the tax cut. Then they convince us, okay, well, we'll let you pass the tax cut. They pass it. And guess what? The loopholes are still there. Weird how that works. Now, one more here, and that's a question. The question of how we pay for these tax cuts, because again, it's very rare for people to ask for that question, and whether or not the tax cuts will end up paying for themselves. Let's take a look.
But the fact is, there is no evidence that tax cuts pay for themselves. The Reagan tax cut back in 1981 added $208 billion to the deficit over 4 years. The Bush tax cuts in 2001 and 2003 added $1.5 trillion to the debt over 10 years. Mr. Mulvaney, you can argue whether or not tax cuts spur economic growth. I think that's a perfectly legitimate argument. There is no evidence that they pay for themselves.
So that's what they're claiming, right? They're claiming that these tax cuts, they will pay for themselves. But as you just saw, Chris Wallace just dropped some knowledge on his head and said, no, but look, you can make an argument, and it wouldn't be a good argument, I would say, but you can make an argument that I guess some tax cuts do lead to growth. Again, not the best argument in my opinion, but maybe there are in some cases that maybe they do. But you can't make the argument that tax cuts pay for themselves. They don't, and we have empirical evidence. We have proof of that because we've already did it. But they're just like, no, if we just give them another tax cut for the rich, that'll be the one. No, we got to stop doing this, right? Look, this is all bullshit math. These tax cuts, again, like the Bush tax cuts, will blow a hole in the deficit for absolutely no benefit. Now, look, I don't think deficit spending is necessarily a bad thing. It actually depends on how it's used, right? I'm not what they call a deficit hawk. Yes, I do actually care about it somewhat. And I don't want us to have to run debts and deficits because I think in the long term, that could be a bad thing. But, if you actually spend, like, I'm okay with that deficit spending if you actually use it to help the country. For example, using it to fund public infrastructure projects. Now, those things, they create jobs and economic activity. And I also believe that you should spend money on healthcare and education. Now, these things have actual, real, tangible benefits for the country. For example, you've got a smarter, healthier workforce with good infrastructure. That's wonderful. You're going to create more businesses, right? Now, tax cuts for the rich, however, well, that doesn't add any benefits, so why are we doing deficit spending on that? It's not like the rich reinvest in the economy when they get a tax cut. They don't. They end up not creating more jobs. Oftentimes, they even end up cutting jobs in order to give more executive bonuses. What Mulvaney is pushing is absolute garbage that is basically for the benefit of his biggest donors. Now, I got to give some credit to Chris Wallace for pushing back on some of that, garbage on Fox News, no less. We need to do what he's doing and continue to hold these politicians' feet to the fire, especially Democrats who actually might otherwise vote for these ridiculous tax cuts. Because trust me, some of them would. And so we've got to, again, continue to hold these politicians accountable, hold their feet to the fire, make sure that they don't pass these ridiculous tax cuts that will end up hurting us in the end. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.